Hello everyone and welcome to today's roundtable webinar discussing the 5 keys for boosting cloud security confidence. Thank you for joining us. My name is Holger Schulze and I'll be your moderator today. Some of you may know me from the information security community on LinkedIn, which is co-producing this webinar. Today we will be discussing the 5 keys for boosting cloud security confidence as we review the results of a recent cloud security survey that highlights cloud security concerns and security best practices to address these concerns. All this comes with real-world advice and examples and best practices from our panel of cloud security experts. Now, before we start diving into cloud security, I'd like to welcome our panelists. And first I'd like to ask each panelist to just very briefly introduce themselves. Now, first I'd like to welcome Ophir Agassi with Cato Networks. Hello, Ophir.
Hello, everybody. Ophir Agassi. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Cato Networks.
Awesome. Welcome, Ophir. Next we have Rich Campagna with BitGlass.
Thanks, Holger. This is Rich Campagna. I'm Vice President of Products at BitGlass, and we're a cloud access security broker. So, in other words, we provide data protection for major SaaS applications like Office 365 and Salesforce.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich. Welcome to the webinar. Next, we have Sami Lane with CloudPassage. Hello, Sami.
Hello, Holger. Hi, I'm Sami. I'm the Principal Technologist at CloudPassage, and we are focusing on the cloud workload security. How do you secure server instances and containers as you move into infrastructure as a service in private and public clouds?
Awesome. Welcome, Sami. Next, we have Javad Malik with AlienVault. Hello, Javad.
Hello, Holger. Hello, everyone. I'm Javad Malik. I'm the security advocate here at AlienVault, and we try to make security simple as possible for everyone, whether you're on-premise or in the cloud, and do crowdsource threat intelligence.
Perfect. Thank you, Javad. Next, we have Patrick Poshor with Dome9.
Hi, Holger. Hi, everyone.
Patrick.
My name is Patrick. I'm a technical evangelist over here at Dome9. So I work with prospects and customers alike solving security-related challenges in the public cloud.
Welcome, Patrick. Next, I'd like to introduce Alvaro Vita with Dell Software. Hello, Alvaro.
Hello, Holger, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Alvaro Vita, I'm a Principal Security Consultant at Dell Software, specializing on hybrid clouds, both on-prem infrastructure and Microsoft-based cloud infrastructure as well.
Awesome. Welcome, Alvaro. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome Dan Waddell with IC Squared. Hello, Dan.
Thanks, Holger. Hi, everybody. Yes, my name is Dan Waddell. I'm Managing Director of IC Squared here in the North America region. Most people know us from our CISSP certification, but we're going to talk a little bit about cloud today and our new Certified Cloud Security Professional certification. So, thanks.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you, Dan. Now, let's get started. Let's look right into some of the key findings of the Cloud Security Report, and let's start with benefits. And after years of operating workloads in the cloud, especially for early adopters of cloud computing, organizations are confirming in our survey that cloud is basically delivering on the original promise of cloud computing, with benefits such as improved availability, cost reduction, and flexible scalability, topping the list. And yeah, that's great news. And again, it validates the core value proposition of cloud. However, cloud is still falling short of expectations in the areas of regulatory compliance and the promise of reduced complexity. Now, let's ask our panel, and I'd like to ask Sami at CloudPassage a question that just came in from our audience that fits well. The question is, Sami, what do you think are the most common misconceptions about moving to the cloud? Sami?
Yeah, I feel like one of the most common ones that we see is people think about cloud as a way to reduce cost simply by lifting and shifting workloads. And a lot of times people don't appreciate that the biggest benefits are coming from refactoring the way the applications are architected and how the applications are delivered. So we feel that that's still not as well understood as we would expect in today's age.
Awesome. Thank you, Sammy. Now, let's take a closer look at, looking at cloud adoption, if you will, through a lens of workloads, right? And our survey reveals that the most popular workloads are storage, significantly up in terms of our survey responses from last year's, followed by computing, also up as a popular workload, and no surprise, virtualization, topping the list of most commonly deployed workloads in the cloud. And with more workloads, and especially more complex and dynamic workloads, moving to the cloud, organizations run the risk of cloud sprawl, right, and loss of control over cloud-based assets and workloads. And on that note, let me ask a question to Ophir at Cato Networks that I think makes sense here as we talk about cloud sprawl. And the question is, how can organizations address the challenge of cloud sprawl? Ophir?
So yeah, cloud sprawl refers to the problems of enterprises having so many cloud services, and with the increase of productivity that cloud brings, it also opens a lot of security challenges and management challenges. And what we usually recommend is to try to consolidate and simplify the network and security again, and this is basically the essence of what we do, is trying to simplify the network, and then on top of that, simplify the network security to allow visibility for the cloud. So that's the basic of what we usually recommend.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good recommendation. Thank you, Ophir. Now, let's take a closer look at some of the most critical barriers, if you will, right, to faster cloud adoption. And when we asked in our survey about the biggest barriers to cloud, in the responses, we saw cloud security concerns not only topping, the list of perceived barriers, but security concerns are actually increasing. And just to put some numbers next to that, we're seeing 53% of respondents in the most recent survey listing cloud security as the #1 cloud barrier, cloud security concerns, that is. That's up by 8 percentage points compared to last year's survey. Next, legal and regulatory compliance concerns are up by 13 percentage points. Also very significant rise relative to other concerns, up to 42% in today's survey. Data loss and leakage risks at 40% are almost unchanged compared to last year. Then we have integration with existing IT environments as a barrier at 35%, also up quite a bit, 6 points. And most notably, and I think that was the fastest riser compared to last year, lack of expertise, right? Lack of cloud expertise at 26% today, significantly up from 16% last year. Now, while we're talking about lack of cloud expertise, let me address a question from our audience on this cloud security, cloud expertise topic, and ask Dan at IC Square. Dan, the shortage of qualified cybersecurity professionals has been well documented. How does this impact cloud adoption? Dan?
Yeah, Holger, thanks. Yeah, it's interesting to note it in this survey because it's actually a statistic that's really held pretty true, right? So obviously IC Squared does our global information security workforce study biannually, and when this question was asked to our membership a few years ago, this was a need back then as well. So I think it's becoming more important as agencies, as companies look to cloud options to help move their data and satisfy their customers. I think when we released the Certified Cloud Security Professional training and exam last year with our partner Cloud Security Alliance at RSA, we got some really tremendous feedback in terms of, I think what it does fundamentally, it helps solve the people part of the people process technology equation, because when you think of moving to the cloud, maybe sometimes you think about the firewall or the encryption, or maybe you think about a process such as an SLA that needs to be fine-tuned, and sometimes, unfortunately, people don't seem to be part of that solution. So I think it's something that IC Squared is addressing with the CCSP, and we're seeing some really good traction in the market.
let's drill down just a bit on security in the cloud. And next we asked our survey audience to basically rate their level of overall security concerns. And an overwhelming majority, 91% of organizations, say that they are very or moderately concerned about cloud security, particularly in public cloud environments. This makes perceived security risk the single biggest factor holding back faster cloud adoption. And there's a couple of questions on this topic coming in. Let me ask the next one. Let me direct this one to Javad at Alien Vault. And the question is, are the threats faced in the cloud any different from threats on-premise? Javad?
So that's a great question, and I think it needs to be examined in a bit of detail. So on one level, the security principles kind of like don't change where you are. But when you do move from prem to cloud, you need to change your mindset a bit, because there are different attack vectors and there are also different objectives. So things like hijacking your cloud instance to mine for bitcoins is a very different kind of threat that only exists in the cloud, not on premise. Similarly, there are like some issues around different architecture and your network security controls that work on-prem. You can't just virtualize and drop them in cloud. I think companies have tried that, and that doesn't work all the time. And then it depends on the provider itself. So you need to take not only the type of cloud instance you have, but the particular provider and what their terms are, and design sort of like threat models around that. And that's where I think that people need to get a bit more creative and learn new sort of like patterns and best practices. And that's where we see a lot of the cloud concerns coming from.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thanks, Javad. Now let's drill down a little further into the specific security concerns. And the research shows that data loss, data leakage, and privacy continue to top the list of cloud-related security concerns, virtually unchanged, by the way, from last year's survey findings. So that seems to remain stable. Let me ask the next question that came in and directed to Rich at BitGlass. And the question is, with respect to data leakage, what are the top sources of potential data leakage that enterprises are concerned with when adopting public cloud apps? Rich?
Yeah, Holger. So what we see, and we deal a lot with SaaS applications, of course, things like Office 365 and Box. But probably the top two concerns we see time and time again when people really narrow down what the sources of leakage are. One is unmanaged device access. The simple fact that with a public cloud app, any user on any device can access one of these cloud-based applications and download or even worse, synchronize large amounts of data. So that's a big concern area for people, and what can they do about restricting or controlling access from unmanaged devices. The other one's a pretty simple one, which is external sharing, right? One of the key things that makes so many file sharing apps in the cloud so popular is how easy it is to share with other people, but that's also the biggest concern for a lot of organizations with respect to potential data leakage. So those are the two, unmanaged devices and external sharing.
Yeah, good. Thanks for pointing that out. Thank you, Rich. I think in the next few minutes or so, we'll revisit those cloud security headaches, and let's tap into the wisdom, if you will, of our panel to see what organizations can do about these headaches and how to address them. But before we go there, I want to highlight compliance related issues, because we're seeing, compared to the previous year, we're seeing a strong gain in compliance-related concerns, moving from, I think it was number 7 spot of a ranked list of concerns last year, all the way up to number 4 this year, which is in line with what we saw earlier, where we saw that compliance concerns are a key barrier to cloud adoption. Let me pick up a question from the audience about legal and regulatory compliance. And Patrick at Dome 9, let me ask you this question. the biggest rise in concerns is in legal and regulatory compliance. What are the real challenges that need to be solved here? Patrick?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. We see the same focus on compliance at Dome9 lately, especially, and I think the answer is probably fourfold, right? It's the first is maybe obviously how to understand initially how your cloud environment's doing from a regulatory and compliance perspective, right? That baseline measurement, and I'm mostly talking about infrastructure as a service in this context. Secondly, how to track and fix those issues that you find that are causing specific compliance checks to fail, right? And don't underestimate definitely how time-consuming this step is, for sure. Third, then, once your environment's healthy and compliant, how to maintain that compliance and governance on an ongoing basis, right? Ensuring that your environment doesn't deviate from a known good baseline, if you will. And then, together, of course, how to do all of that without taking up too much time, too much money, too much effort, right? It used to be that a select number of industries were heavy regulated, energy, communications, and as such had data security standards to adhere to, but these days that spectrum is widening, and I think with broad standards like PCI, legal and regulatory compliance are becoming everyone's concern. I think that's why we see it as a higher and higher level concern. So ultimately, I think it's important for the testing and the maintenance of compliance to become simple and affordable for everyone.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Thank you, Patrick. Now, let's take a look at, traditional security tools, if you will, that have been built for on-premise environment, right? And see if they're fit to protect cloud assets, cloud data applications. And not surprisingly, most traditional tools, right, as they have been designed for on-premise environments, they've not been designed for dynamic cloud environments and the unique challenges, right, that cloud presents. In fact, the survey confirms that traditional tools work only somewhat or not at all for over half of cybersecurity professionals. 59% of our survey participants say that, traditional tools basically don't work for them in the cloud. And the gap is primarily in both, verifying security policies and definitely as it relates to visibility, right, into cloud infrastructure. And this is really a hot topic, and there's tons of questions coming in. And I think this is also a great topic to pivot into the, or back to the core topic of our webinar, right, which is the 5 keys for boosting cloud security confidence. So let's look at some of the number one, analysis, right, why we see traditional tools failing, but also what organizations can do to overcome those challenges. And so let me ask Sammy at CloudPassage this question. The question is, why can't I just deploy the same server security tools from my data center onto my cloud instance? Sammy?
Yeah, we've had this conversation recently with 2 Fortune 20 companies where they've tried that, and then they came to the conclusion that it's not viable. And the real short answer for a webinar format would be speed. The rate at which the instances of workloads, whether they're AMIs at Amazon or stem cells running on a Cloud Foundry in your private data center, they come in, and are deprovisioned all through automation. And a lot of the traditional tooling is relying on constructs that no longer exist, like fixed known IP addresses, etc. And the fundamental shift is that all of the controls need to be instantiated through automation or you're dead. And similarly, all of the actual controls need to be able to be tied to a logical construct that is a server and its role, as opposed to a physical construct that has things like MAC addresses and IP addresses that are static. Those are the 2 fundamental things that break most of the traditional tools. And then, of course, the big mind shift that's required when you realize that there is no span port in the public cloud. You can't just deep packet inspect your way out of this. So the traditional thinking of everything centered on packets and an inspection of those packets and network boundaries, that needs to shift, and the focus needs to be on the workload itself. So those would be the fundamental things that change in my mind.
Yeah, that's great advice. I couldn't agree more with the focus on the workload. That makes perfect sense in an environment where the perimeter is basically dissolving and there is no physical data center to to point to for location of data assets, dynamic workloads, what have you. The next question here is about application controls, and let me ask Rich at BitGlass this question. What are the trade-offs between using native application controls to implement technologies versus third-party cloud access security brokers? Rich?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think probably the most obvious one is that a third-party security tool like a CASB, and this is similar with premises apps and traditional infrastructure-based security tools. But something like a CASB, obviously, that's a set of policies and controls that cuts across cloud-based applications, and then can provide that single point of visibility and control for any app you may have deployed in your organization. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. And if you take that and dig a little bit deeper under the surface, what you'll see is that with the different cloud apps, especially the major enterprise-focused SaaS applications, the different vendors, most of them have made some investments in in data protection types of capabilities. But I think the biggest challenge is that they really vary from one cloud app vendor to the next. So Cloud App A may have invested heavily in perhaps, I don't know, data leakage prevention types of capabilities. Cloud App B encrypts data at rest but doesn't allow the organization to control the keys, whereas Cloud App C does, right? So you have a very inconsistent set of approaches to security, and that makes it difficult if you're looking at multiple cloud applications in your organization. It's difficult to have a consistent security policy for the public cloud by leveraging the built-in controls with applications. And so, if you're an organization that has just one cloud app and you anticipate having just one cloud app for the foreseeable future, chances are you should be taking a pretty close look at the built-in controls that come with whatever that cloud-based application is. But if you're like the increasing number of organizations that are taking a cloud-first approach and are actively rolling out multiple cloud applications, then it's very high likelihood that a third-party tool like a CASB makes more sense for you versus the built-in controls in the applications themselves.
Thank you, Rich. Great advice. The next question for Patrick at Dome9. The question is, in what ways is securing cloud infrastructure different from securing data center infrastructure? Patrick?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's probably a lot of detail in that answer, but I think it really boils down to the fact that traditional perimeter or gateway-centric approaches really don't work when a single simple software config can make anything a perimeter endpoint, right? So, for example, maybe you've got an automation script you're developing and testing. One small mistake in that first run, and you can have really immediate and unintended sort of data exposure, and that's quite a bit different than a network that's secured primarily at the perimeter. Combine that with the fact that you don't always have the ability to deploy agents or in services provided by cloud service providers, right? Such as databases as a service or load balancers, or even in serverless architectures. So you need an agentless approach that embraces the native cloud service provider controls rather than one that combats them, right? For total security, visibility, and control. And I think that's doubly true in dynamic environments where instances come and go, right, through the use of auto-scaling, for example. So, the answer is probably broad, but at a high level, too much change to rely on perimeter security, which is definitely what we did in the old data center model, and, new kinds of assets, not just workloads. We have services we have to protect too, and that represents a real challenge.
That's a good point. Thanks, Patrick. The next question is about Active Directory, and Alvaro, you're our AD expert on the panel. So let me ask Alvaro at Dell, in hybrid directory environments like on-prem AD and Azure AD, Office 365, is Microsoft as the cloud provider taking care of my security controls? Alvaro?
They are in the cloud. So usually in a hybrid environment, in a Microsoft hybrid environment, what happens is that your on-prem Active Directory is synchronized up to the Azure AD Auth365 environment. In other words, the authoritative directory for authentication and authorization comes from on-prem. And as such, the customer Active Directory usually resides in the data center of the customer is responsible for those controls. So, for example, if I make a change to a group called Finance on-prem in my Active Directory in my data center, and then that syncs up to Azure AD O365, and that in turn will grant access to, let's say, a SharePoint online site on the O365 platform, then I need to ensure that my on-prem controls, my security controls on-prem, are compensated adequately so that whatever I do on-prem is reflected well in the cloud, because all the security that Microsoft provides, which is awesome on the cloud, will not help you if anything that is syncing from on-prem to the cloud is not good.
Thank you, Alvaro. That's good to know. The next question is about traditional versus cloud security tools, and I'd like to ask this question. I'd like to ask Javad at AlienVault, if traditional security tools aren't overly useful for the cloud, and buying two sets of security controls can be cost prohibitive, should enterprises prioritize on-premise over cloud or vice versa? Javad?
Well, that's a good question. It's kind of like if you're in a casino, do you bet on red or black in roulette? I'll answer this in two ways. First, from the enterprise perspective, who's looking to buy the security tools, is I'm reminded of a quote that was told to me about a CIO of a drinks company, and he was in charge of a massive technology estate, and he was asked what his job role was, or what his function was, or how he saw himself in the company. And his response was, well, my job is to help the company sell more beer. And it's quite a different perspective to look at it. So I always take that as deploy your security controls in a way that will help your company sell more beer. If it's selling whatever that beer may be or service you're providing. If it's on cloud, follow the cloud. If it's on premise, that's where you should put most of your effort into. From the other point, the second point I'd say is more from a vendor perspective, and I say this as a vendor, but I don't believe customers should necessarily be forced to make these choices or forced to choose one over the other, or have to piecemeal together multiple solutions. Rather, the vendors should adapt to customers' needs. So if a customer wants to run their business in the cloud or on premises or under the seas or in the North Pole, the technology should be there to support it. We're not in a position to force customers to come one way or another. So security, and this kind of like my rant of the day, should be able to provide security anywhere the customer is in any business model. And that's kind of like where we as vendors need to get to as well, to help customers solve this problem.
Thank you, Javad. Now, by the way, I like your beer example, and I'm not kidding when I say that we got a spike in engagement on our webinar and questions just when you talked about that. So thanks for bringing in some real-life examples. Thanks, Javad.
No worries.
Now, and with many of our questions and topics we just discussed, we're already pivoting toward the cloud confidence builders, right, and actionable advice and things that our audience can take away to boost cloud security and confidence in cloud. And as we just discussed, right, organizations are moving to the cloud. They're facing new security challenges, and in a nutshell, many of those cannot be addressed with traditional approaches, right? And while cybersecurity technology certainly is critical, right, to overcoming those challenges, secure clouds alone cannot exist alone, right, without the right cloud security expertise, right? So technology is necessary, but not sufficient in producing the right cloud security posture. And our data confirms that 61% of organizations plan to, as their number one right path to stronger cloud security, they're planning to train and certify existing IT staff in cloud security to ensure that the proper security controls are, being implemented and managed properly. And There's a question I'd like to direct to Dan at IC Squared, our certification expert. The question is, how can organizations ensure that their staff possess the right required skills and expertise as they move to the cloud? Dan?
Yeah, Holger, thanks. Yeah, I'm really thrilled that you broke out the question this way in terms of separating the training and the certifying, because I really do think they're two separate things. So let's tackle the training aspect first. So obviously one of the tenets of being a CISSP has been our common body of knowledge, right? So the CISSPs like myself in the world that took and passed that very difficult exam, we're very immersed and very familiar with our common body of knowledge and the current 8 domains in that. And then obviously, in order to become a CISSP, you also had to have the experience as well. So in terms of training it, I think the key is translating that need for a common body of knowledge into the cloud. So, you know, when we sat down with Cloud Security Alliance and we talked about, you know, what is that taxonomy? What is that common lexicon in terms of educating the current staff out there that are probably, you know, very familiar with a lot of these terms from a rack and stack perspective. Certainly the folks on the webinar today, you know, may know what CapEx, OpEx is and all the flavors of cloud service deployments and public and private and hybrid and all the differences. But really in order to fill this workforce gap that we've always talked about, I think there's that need to be able to train folks on some common terms. And that's where the CCSP CDK really comes in handy. And then I think on the other side of the ledger, right, when we talk about certifying people, right, you know, being able as a company to be able to say, you know what, I've got these positions open, and I need to be able to at least have some sort of baseline understanding of where the candidates are, and being able to say, hey, here's a candidate that has the CCSP. They've demonstrated a commitment to learning and to understanding and to gaining knowledge in this field. They've passed a pretty difficult exam. You know, they've demonstrated experience in this field. So it really gives employers and agencies and companies a warm fuzzy that, you know, the person that they're hiring, if they have this badge, can certainly get them started on the right path.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Now let's drill down a little deeper into the cloud confidence builders, right? More actionable, specific things that organizations can do and best practices to build confidence in the cloud. For example, the cloud security study and survey suggests a number of cloud security capabilities, right? Shown on the screen, including the ability, for example, to set and enforce security policies across cloud environments, which by far is the most requested capability to increase confidence in clouds. But in addition to, you know, specific security features, what other solutions, what else can be done in terms of security policy, security solutions, right, security training or best practices? And there's a couple of questions around that topic, and I'd like to ask our panel, starting with Ophir at Cato Networks. And Ophir, the question is, how can organizations simplify management complexity of hybrid clouds? Ophir?
Thanks, Holger. So yeah, you know, we see a lot of shift, of movement of business application to cloud, and then, you know, with the dynamic of the cloud or application movement between the cloud or the private cloud and the public cloud, and what we see that a lot of advanced techniques, advanced tools to address the security challenges. But when we actually speak to customers, a lot of them address the challenge of how do I train my people? How do I actually be able to join this race of those advanced technologies? And they're actually, at the end of the day, they're looking to simplify everything. They're looking again to gain visibility and control on their cloud applications. And I think what today the best approach is to try to consolidate those security tools. So instead of having one technology for your private data center and another third-party solution for your public instances, you need to somehow to find a solution that can consolidate both the security tools and, more essentially, the security policy and visibility in order to gain the control and confidence back again.
Thank you, Ophir. The next question is about security controls. And Alvaro, let me ask you, that's Alvaro Vita at Dell. What is the single most important security control that can be implemented to mitigate risk when moving to cloud or integrating with cloud-based applications? Alvaro?
Yeah, so there is not one specific thing that you can do, right? But what you should have is you should have a continuous life cycle. So security is not something that is static. It's a dynamic process that constantly needs to be shifted and adapted to. So having a continuous life cycle approach allows you to always be fine-tuning your security compensating control. So for example, our security methodology around hybrid directory environments includes, assessing and having a baseline to understand who's got access to what, detecting what they're doing with that access, whether it's on-prem for Active Directory or on Office 365 or Azure AD, and then remediating things that are unauthorized, and then mitigating that from happening again, and ultimately, if it's something that creates damage, recovering. So those continuous lifecycle controls, that methodology needs to be in place so that you don't have any gaps on your security compensating controls. So that's really the best practice.
Thanks. That's good advice. Thanks, Alvaro. Now, let me open this type of question. Yeah, I think let's open this up to the entire panel. So basically, the question is, what are your key takeaways, right, for building cloud confidence? What advice, what actionable advice would you give our audience? And Rich, do you want to kick it off, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's fairly clear from the findings that the types of things that people are really concerned about with respect to cloud security are really revolve around their own usage of cloud apps. And I think if you look at the last few years of cloud adoption in the enterprise, one thing is clear. 2 or 3 years ago, what most people were concerned about was that someone like Microsoft or Salesforce or Box or what have you would be breached, and there would be a lot of these widespread service outages and hacks and that type of thing against the big cloud app providers. And that, so far at least, that hasn't turned out to be the case. And I think the reason for that is that the typical major cloud app vendor is going to spend a lot more on security personnel and security infrastructure than most enterprises can. And so what we're starting to see now, and I think this is reflected in the survey results, is that people believe that cloud applications can be secure, and really the one key thing to kind of take a look at or to keep in mind is that it's really your usage or your enterprise's usage of a cloud application that needs to be, kind of have some parameters around it and some controls around it to ensure that you're using these cloud apps securely overall. So I guess that's the big takeaway for me, and I think it's the big piece of advice is that it seems like we can trust these big cloud app vendors. They're investing heavily in security, but we just need to make sure that we're using these cloud apps in a risk-appropriate fashion.
Thank you, Rich. Great takeaway. Yeah, let me just go through our panel. Patrick, let me ask you next. What would you say is your key takeaway? What actionable advice would you give our audience for building cloud confidence?
Yeah, I think for me it would be to utilize a comprehensive security platform, and one preferably that can enforce your security posture rather than simply monitor. There's a great commercial most of us have probably seen on TV. I think it's from a company called LifeLock, where there's a security guard kind of standing in a bank when a robbery is happening, and people kind of look at him like, "Aren't you going to do anything?" And he says, "Well, I'm a monitor. I'm just here to inform." And that's kind of the takeaway, right? Don't buy the security monitor. Buy the security guard that can interpret what's going on in your environment and then respond on your behalf, right? Because what we don't want to do is watch the output of logging information, make decisions, and then correct the problem. There could be a gap of hours there. So, find a comprehensive platform that can enforce, not just monitor, that ultimately provides end-to-end visibility and control over the security and compliance posture of your infrastructure. All right, so you can find fix issues, and then probably most importantly, stay fixed across multiple clouds.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick. Next, Sammy, what are your actionable, what advice would you give our audience? Sammy?
Yeah, Holger, on that confidence builder slide where you say setting and enforcing security policy across clouds being one of the biggest concerns, that really is the key. And if you think about this in context of running servers, workloads, AMIs, things like that at Google Compute Engine, Azure, and of course Amazon, one of the key things that we see as the takeaway is that you need to create a system where you can create policies that are automatically applied. So the automation is the key. All of your modern infrastructure is created through automation. You're going to have infrastructure automation with Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Salt, Bosch. You're going to have your DevOps pipelines delivering code through Jenkins. If your security tooling isn't automated and policy-based, where you pre-provision that policy and then it gets applied to those systems as they are spun up and, as importantly, spun down, you really don't have a good chance of maintaining that key visibility. Like the previous panelists, like Patrick was saying, you have to have that visibility, and you've got to do it all through automation, or you won't be able to respond the way the modern infrastructure is being built.
Exactly. Thank you, Sammy. Javad, what's your recommendation?
So, yeah, there's two sides to this. I think there's the actual technical side, and then there's the actual confidence building side. It reminds me of this study I read and about if you think of a shark and if you think of a coconut, people would be more scared of a shark. But falling coconuts apparently kill, on average, 150 people a year, where sharks cause about 5. So a lot of it's just about the information that's available and preconceived notions. So sometimes, we speak to customers who are afraid of the cloud or have no confidence in the cloud, but they're not too sure exactly why. So some of it's just an education part, and I think a lot of that is down to visibility. So if you can get good visibility into your cloud, what the instances are, your usage, your users, the vulnerabilities, how data's moving around. Once you start building up that picture, you get the information you need, and that's what will help build people's confidence, or maybe not, but at least it gives them the information to make an informed decision. I think at the moment there's a lot of faith being put in what either the cloud provider or what a security vendor informs people, but doing your own due diligence and finding out things by experimentation is kind of like where a lot of the mature companies are at the moment.
Thank you, Javad. Very insightful. And by the way, I love the coconut statistics. Going to make sure that my next beach vacation I'll not fall asleep under a coconut palm tree on the beach. That seems to be a dangerous activity.
You're safe for sleeping with a shark, yeah.
Good. Dan, let me ask you next. What would be your key takeaway and suggestion for improving confidence in the cloud and cloud security? Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Holger. Just really, again, keeping in mind the people part of the people process technology equation. With great power comes great responsibility. And, back in the day when I was a Unix system administrator, I had to remember that the rm-rf was the bad command, and you had to put the little sticky on my keyboard to make sure that I wouldn't do that. And now you could DDoS an entire database or Amazon instance with a click of a button and a poorly configured Nessus scanner. So I would just say, make sure that you educate your people, your staff. The IT staff out there right now are great candidates to be the next generation of the cloud security professional, and just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Dan. And yes, with great power comes great responsibility. That's a good obviously a good takeaway. Alvaro, let me ask you, what is your key suggestion, key guidance that you would have for our audience?
Sure, a couple. So first, unless you're, been around for a couple of months, you're going to have some kind of on-prem presence, right, that needs to be integrated with your cloud infrastructure. And because there's not a lot of pure play cloud customers, they have some kind of hybrid infrastructure. Make sure that as you embark on that road, that you have a security methodology that encompasses both your on-prem infrastructure as well as your cloud infrastructure. And second, remember that humans are the new perimeter, right? So regardless of whether it's cloud, on-prem, regardless of the great security products that you may have, none of that would matter. At the end of the day, the human being or the person at the end of that keyboard will be the security factor, the threat, if you will. And so you got to put safe guards around it so that that human is well trained, well protected, and then you have a good methodology around those humans.
Thank you, Alvaro. And Ophir, to round out and ask everybody on our panel, what are your key suggestions, key advice for our audience to increase cloud security confidence?
So again, I think that the biggest recommendation would be to try to think in more old-fashioned way and try to return the simplicity back to the network and the way the architecture work, everything is built together. Try to integrate, consolidate security solutions and the network together in order to gain confidence back again.
Thanks, Ophir. With that, let's tackle a couple more questions from our audience, and I'll just ask the questions as they come up, and whoever comes first, whoever wants to address the question, feel free to do so. And the question is, what is the best way to find out about new threats so that your cloud service provider can mitigate potential vulnerabilities? Who wants to take that question?
I can take one aspect of it. This is Sammy with Cloud Patches. One way to ensure that is to, of course, make sure that any servers and systems that you run in the cloud, whether it's public cloud or private cloud like OpenStack, is to instrument those and have ability to continuously monitor against new published software vulnerabilities and configuration security change requirements. That's one baseline thing. But that doesn't really address kind of like the new vectors of threat. And of course, you need to have then intelligence as well on understanding what other vectors are being used rather than the actual instance itself.
Perfect, thank you. The next question is, can you speak to the challenges from the customer's perspective of not being able to monitor physical environment controls, including personnel controls for the CSP?
This is Rich. Maybe from Big Glass. Maybe I'll jump in on that one. I think that early on this was a big concern for folks, but through early on there were a lot of surveys and audits and that type of thing that enterprises were conducting individually, and now more and more there are third-party certifications and the like that these cloud service providers are conducting. I think people are getting okay and comfortable with that, and it's this is similar to the driving a car versus flying a plane analogy. I mean, it's provided you're focusing in on and deploying major cloud service providers that have checked all the right compliance boxes and have been through these audits time and time again. I think that largely people are less and less, and rightly so, less and less concerned about things like who physically has access to these data centers, because you can get that information, and other people that have come before you in adopting these cloud applications have checked that out as well.
Thank you, Rich. The next question, I think, yeah, that's one for Dan. And Dan, the question is, will there be an equivalent of CISSP for cloud? Dan?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what the CCSP is designed to do. So one of the great responses that we've gotten so far from our current CISSP membership is the fact that this has come out, and if you are a current CISSP, it waives the experience requirements. So it's a great opportunity for those that are already CISSPs. That can come on board, and for those that may not necessarily be a CISSP, I'd certainly encourage visit our website and reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to give you that information. But yes, thank you very much for your interest.
Awesome. All right, there are many more questions coming in, and there's probably many more than we can address today, as we're getting closer to the end of our time window. Also, many thanks to our panelists for educating us on how to better protect cloud environments. As a thank you for attending this webinar, we're going to give you a copy of the full 2016 Cloud Security Report. Again, thanks everybody, thanks to our panel, and thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. And I hope to see all of you at one of our future webinars. Thanks everybody.